Good afternoon to you all. My name's Jim Crawford. I'm the regional vice president for the chapters in North Carolina and South Carolina. I'm over here supporting the Fort Gordon chapter and the FC International here. We have a presentation given by the moderator and so forth to Colonel Hartman, and the topic will be enabling a data-centric army. This session will run for a total of 60 minutes. It has you can get a credit from GAIAC and CompTIA. I'll be at the back helping you scan it at the end of the course. The data, that machine will not turn on until 5 minutes at the end of the hour. So nobody can get scanned sooner. So plus I'll be the ogre at the door making sure we get no new cheaters coming in. Anyway. This is run 60 minutes. Please ask a lot of questions. And if there's anything that I might be able to help, just by all means, let me know. Without further ado, Colonel Hartman, you can introduce your team.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody that's joining us this afternoon. I see that we've got representatives from a number of different countries beyond the countries we have up here on the panel. For Italy and Germany, and I will say if we have some questions and you represent one of those other countries and you're like, I would really like to share my opinion on that, we do have the mic, we can get you up here and provide that opportunity. With that, I believe it's been 2 or 3 years since the last time TechNet was able to have an international panel. It got delayed during COVID, and so we are kicking things back off again. That means like most things in the military, you get that AAR from the year before, see what worked really well and what didn't, and we didn't have that, so we're making it up as we go along. But the awesome thing is we've got 2 awesome panelists, Commander Coach and Major Tornisi. With that, Commander Coach, if you'd tell a little bit about your background, please.
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. Really happy to be here and on the panel. I hope we will have interesting discussions. So I entered the service in Germany in 1998 in the Navy, obviously, and studied computer science in the beginning. I had a few tours as a deputy weapon engineering officer and later as weapon engineering officer on board of German frigates. Very interesting time. And after that, I was back at university, did my PhD in computer science with a focus on network security, and went back to the service but continued the academic work. So I did my habilitation in between as a, let's say, weekend project, quite intense one. And nowadays I'm also assistant professor for, let's say, cyber, with focus cybersecurity and cyber operations at the University of the Federal Armed Forces in Munich. In real life, I built up the Department for Penetration Testing in the German forces, which was brand new to that time. Only 2 years because I had to go to the next deployment, but that was really a great thing, really going down, not only having a look at the, let's say, regular software vulnerabilities, but going down to the firmware, even glitching into the hardware and doing funny stuff like that. So really enjoyed that one. After that, complete different direction. So from the technical base on bits and bytes, going to the political level and being desk officer for cyber policy in the Ministry of Defense. And one of my tasks was doing the military part for the German cybersecurity strategy, the last one. So that was really interesting to deal with all the other ministries and fighting for single words for a couple of weeks and stuff like that. So it was the last paper the government did before the election, so I really was very happy that it passed after 1 year of work and was not completely destroyed. So very interesting work. And after that, at the moment, I'm at NATO ACT at Norfolk, and I'm the section head for interoperability verification and validation. And my main business with that is running the NATO exercise collision warrior interoperability exercise, which is a quite huge interoperability exercise, which is happening in June. So last one is only a couple of weeks away. So for me, the panel is very interesting, especially with the interoperability views and my background from that. But I'm not speaking from a NATO perspective here. So all that is only my personal background to highlight these legal announcements. Yeah, and having that said, really looking forward to your questions and the discussions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Major Tornisi. I'm very glad to be here to share my insight and my experience to contribute to this panel. So I am a signal officer by trade in the Italian Army, and after a few years I had an experience as a platoon commander at the military academy. I had the engineer platoon. And then I just continued my signal career as a company commander, one tour overseas in Kosovo. And then I received a call for being part of the cyber capability development working group in the Italian Army. We were creating the new Italian Army cyber unit. And so I jumped in. I was part of that. And then they say, if you have done something wrong, just to be sure, we will make you command the company in the unit you just participated to create. And so I was company commander in that unit, which was a great experience. And then after my staff college, I was assigned here in the USA, the Cyber Center of Excellence, as the liaison officer for the Italian Army to the CCOE. So I'm looking forward to share with you our insights.
Excellent, gentlemen. I appreciate that and that diverse background. A couple different stages in the career, working with NATO interoperability. I'm sure we're going to hear some great feedback as we go through the discussion. Also wanted to highlight for the audience, we will have time at the end if you have follow-on questions or some other questions going in more into depth on topics we didn't get to with the panel. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end for you to be able to bring those up. So with that, for the first topic, as countries focus more on the complex training environments, including urban ones, old training methods don't always align. Urban areas are going to have hundreds of transmitters, lots of different organizations. There's going to be multi-path reflections from buildings. There's going to be lots of interference. What is your country seeing as a challenge or approach that it might use with training either equipment or their service members to deal with new environments?
Okay, maybe I will start. I think most important is a combination of about high-quality simulations, let's say it that way, because you can't do everything on bare metal in the real world. But on the other hand, that's quite limited. From my cyber experience, you can see that with cyber ranges. So we have a lot of these things out, and they are very useful. But if you have a few to the complete attack vectors which are available, they are limited to the most important ones and the ones regularly used. But you will be aware about the new discussions about the downfall vulnerability, which is another vulnerability in the processor, so in the hardware itself. So they are limited possibilities to reflect these in these cyber ranges. You can add an hardware element to improve that, but it makes things more complex. So you need a training element that fits in a simulation, in a cyber range or something like that. The most important things for the training for the mass, let's say it that way, but you still need these specialized elements which are too complex for everybody and for a regular exercise as an add-on, because you can't do everything by simulation. So from my point of view, it's also very important if you talk about, for example, the reflections in urban scenarios and stuff like that, to also do that in real world, because the simulation does not catch everything. From another point of view, I think if the soldier has to think about reflections in an urban environment, our technology is not at the point where it should be. So we must ensure that the technology that we are providing the warfighter is on a status that he can focus on the target and not thinking about these things.
Okay, of course, it's a very vast topic. I will try to just touch some bullet. So I will just say that we are speaking about a data-centric army for 2030. So we speak about convergence of science technology in a large-scale combat operation MDO. And this morning, Major Stenton was speaking about an agnostic soldier. So we are speaking about a very complex future scenarios environment. And so in this complexity, we are looking for new skill. In my opinion, the most important skill that I will look for the cyber operator is the capability of rapidly adapt to the change of emerging, and I would say disruptive technology. So it's not enough now to train them of this tool or this specific equipment. They have to be able to have basic fundamentals about what is behind this equipment, this piece of equipment. And so, like a software engineer, I don't start learning a specific language. I learn how usually a processor will elaborate my code. And then I will just, in 1 week, update my knowledge with a new kind of language. So we have to kind of adapt how the Army train toward this kind of like new culture about training. So I would say, think about the binomial association between the hardware and the man behind the equipment, so the human capital, which we can train about that. So of course, these are the skills that we are looking, people that is able to be frustrated by multiple failures, which is a different way of failure because we train in the Army in stressful situation, but it's a new kind of cognitive stressful that they found themselves. And so be able to adapt, be able to learn from their error, write down every time the lesson learned, and then from that, looking for maybe 100 times will be a failure, and 100 and the first time you will maybe achieve the result you were looking for. And so what you can use a method to achieve this new skill, of course, we have now plenty of new solutions, which is emulation, simulation. We are speaking about virtual environment. We can create very easily synthetic environment now. But of course, this is a huge cost, depending on what you're looking for, also to maintain in time all of this. And of course, starting from that, you can go to the real world training.
So you both touched on simulations or emulations, and then I know a level beyond that maybe is getting into digital twins, where it's fully replicating some of those systems. For the access, for your people training in those environments, how does that work? I know a lot of what we see in the U.S. is we have certain installations or locations, and to get a fully immersive experience, and other things we can provide remotely, but we can't provide everything remotely. So how is your country dealing with either centralized or decentralized or some hybrid in terms of its training?
I think I'm not aware about every detail of all the services in the German forces, but we have a mix with these setups. We're doing hybrid things. We are even able to interconnect on a virtual way since decades, not only a few years. We started that with the Navy in the 90s when I entered the service to connect, for example, ships that are in the harbor to do common exercises together and things like that. So I think that's very useful. I think we, from a policy point of view, we are not far enough with that now. We really have to think about the data exchange. We said everything is in the future will be data centric. So I think classification is still a challenge for the work of the coalition. It's easy for a nation. It's challenging for the coalition. And I think we have to start that directly in the exercise. Train as you fight, to have the procedures, to have everything available, and not struggle around with too many different classifications, different networks, over-classification, and these things. When transferring the things learned on a national level in these systems to a coalition and theater scenario.
So from the Italian Army perspective, we have one CIMA range at the joint level, and of course we have other laboratories in the cyber unit. We also have the possibility to refer to NATO modeling and simulation centers distributed among the other organizations. So it's kind of an osmosis between international and coalition organization, but also like what we always look for is affordable equipment. And when we speak also about SIMA range or like training environment, we should also keep in account. We need the best trainer able to operate this range or this training environment, and also the data set that always we need to actually effectively operate in this laboratory. So sharing this data between different organizations with different purpose can be a challenge, especially if we are looking for a different skill among our organization. Because of course, at the strategical level, maybe there will be a different need for certain kind of training. And so also moving people around Europe or in another continent can be a challenge.
I'm going to try this mic so I can hopefully get picked up by the mic and still be facing you guys while I ask questions. So we'll see how that works. All right. So let's touch on with policy. And frequently we see policy maybe lagging technology or lagging that initiative that we in the military will want to go and do things. We want to work with our coalition partners, and we see a path forward, but we're not allowed to. And with cyber, electronic warfare, communications continuing to evolve rapidly, anything that stands out as a particular success or challenge in dealing with policymakers?
From my point of view, a lot, but going back to the roots, I was quite impressed this morning when we had the discussions about the networks in the US Army and bringing these things with a unified network together, and the discussion about highlighting the need for integrated and not only interoperable systems. That's great, but from a coalition point of view, again, wow, we are not there yet. We are fighting with the interoperability bit and not with the integrated bit. And my exercise, civics, that's the core is realizing interoperability. And one other quote from the morning, which is very important, is 2030, that's in a week, you can say that. So if you have a look at the capabilities we have on the battlefield in 2030 from the NATO coalition nations, these standards are defined during these weeks. We will have the Spiral 6 specification till the end of the year, and everything that's in there will be on the battlefield in 2030. And that's a huge challenge that the technological evolution is faster and faster, and we are also, from a policymaker point of view, not doing an ideal job when selecting the standards and putting in. So like reducing the networks for a unified network, and you can go forward. It's the same here. We have too many standards. From my personal point of view, in the one or other spiral, nations are struggling with the implementation, and that hampers realizing the coalition interoperability, because only it's based on a standard doesn't mean it works together. If you have the same vendor in your nation, it will work. If you have 5 different vendors in 5 different nations, they use the same standards, but it doesn't work. So we have the exercise to identify where are the challenges to improve the systems, and then after doing the work and a couple of rounds and improving, it's working, but it's not that easy. So interoperability is still a huge challenge for the coalition nations, and I think with some policy focus on reducing the standards, really identified what are the core bits we need for the battlefield in 2030 for realizing NDO, that would be helpful. And of course, the other thing I already mentioned, I think we have to think about not classification, because military and especially the intelligence community is very good in classification, but bad in declassification, right? And on the battlefield, a lot of data has a quite short lifetime. And being able to work more agile in a coalition scenario, we have to think about the classification and the timeliness and the time how long data should be classified. And we must be aware, very important, what you mentioned with the rapidly adaptation, that's one of the key aspects. also for the communication on the future battlefield. We're talking about post-quantum cryptography and these things, and doing a lot of nice stuff in the science community, and NIST is doing the standardization process. So there will be a lot of standards in the future that will be failing from today to tomorrow because of new knowledge. Quantum computers will be available in more powerful versions, and we must be able to be more agile with our systems to, from a technical point of view, to exchange algorithms really in a couple of hours and not weeks, months, or years. And also from the training perspective, that everybody, not only in one nation, but in the coalition, is able to handle with these things. So it's, again, a reduction of the complexity of everything we are doing and focusing on the most basic elements.
I agree. So when I think about the policy, I think about more senior leadership engagement and more subject matter expert meeting in an ideal continuous training. So we speak about persistent training environment, which means, let's say, the possibility to be complementary between the joint level training facility and the single service facility, and also to find a legal framework that will help both. So we, for instance, we need to use a data set that will replicate a very realistic situation in a simulation environment, but maybe there is an authority that need to certify this data before they usually use it. And then if it's going to be shared with other coalition partner, who is in charge to manage this data? Who is going to trace what we do in this training environment? How we expose this data? How we be sure about the identity access management? Because, of course, if we speak of an unclassified environment, it can still be on some level kind of okay, because maybe we speak about the sandbox, so we are just trying to do something. But if we want to push the training to a more realistic, synthetic environment, or maybe we expose more in the real world, it can be a decision that has to be made at the very high strategical command, and even if it's about training, because we don't know the potential consequences of this. And so more need for senior leadership engagement, legal framework, and to define how we want to access in a continuous, in a seamlessly way to this environment training.
All right. So directives or guidance from governments on what to prepare for drives some of our thoughts. And while sometimes we're ahead on where we want policy to be, sometimes the policymakers are ahead of us in what they're starting to look at. In the U.S., the National Defense Authorization Act of 2022, Section 1505, directed a focus on operational technology and weapon systems. So getting beyond just the RF communications or IP-based traffic and looking more at the interconnection of different things. In the U.S., we also had a few years back the large retailer Target. Their financial network was hacked by somebody coming in through the HVAC system. And as we all appreciate in here today, a functioning HVAC is a wonderful thing. But in terms of dealing with the connected systems and other things that may be added in beyond the traditional network security or communication security, is anything in your country or your partners that you're working closely with standing out that's expanding the scope of what you need to deal with? And I'll start with Major Tunisi.
Okay, so we have a similar law. We basically created in the 2021 the Italian National Cybersecurity Agency, which basically protect all the critical infrastructure of the nation. So of course, when we train, we cannot train by default on connected device, especially when we speak about operational technology. But this institution has the authority and oversee. So there is, of course, a cooperation because they detach national cyber cell, and of course they have a huge presence of military personnel that they consider the backbone of the agency, because of course they have. We are speaking about a very creative environment where people has to have lateral thinking, but also you need a certain amount of discipline, people that has been trained to actually do the things in some way. So you need a little bit of everything, and we usually always train together. And they will eventually, depending on the kind of training or the situation, they have the authority to authorize eventually some kind of training with certain segmented portion. So what they did, they created a law that is called the perimeter law for cyber, which is basically they define as an authority which also certified and audit private companies, so all the unclassified Italian network. They define a digital perimeter, which is also where they can use the so-called golden power, so where the government can actually act on companies or organization in Italy, and who is interacting inside this digital perimeter, because you can 100% protect all the networks, so you focus on priorities. And so the training usually, in the Italian Army, we call it the concept, the doctrinal level, tactical bubble. So let's say where there is the compact power nerve center of software and hardware and data. So we identify that, and depending on the need of the training, we can always refer to this authority.
Well, from a point of view of the Bundeswehr, we extended, of course, the focus on things like operational technology. So, for example, when I built up the penetration testing, I set up one section for dealing with operational technology, because it's a lot of these things in weapon systems and other things. In principle, in Germany, if you have a look to the whole critical infrastructure, it's more complicated because the forces in peacetime is only responsible for the own networks and systems. So we are not responsible for the energy, for the power plants or something like that. In wartime, we have additional rights to protect the one or other thing, but you have to think about how should I send a very limited number of experts in the military service dealing with that stuff in wartime to protect the operation of a telecom or a power plant. It just doesn't work. So we have a concept with the cyber reserve. We are trying to engage guys from the civilian world and bring them into the cyber domain as a reservist, and working with them together for a couple of weeks per year, so they are aware about the processes, so you're able to connect and network to them and have communication channels in the time when you need it. Because if we really have a situation of a conflict or a war, then of course also the original companies will need these experts and not giving that to the Bundeswehr. So if they are trained well together with the forces, I think that can have a strong effect. So cyber reserve is one of these concepts we are having there. And of course the responsible office, the Office for Information Security in Germany, that's growing and growing with a huge new footprint, because in Europe in general we have some regulations, like for example the NIS2 and the brand new SARE directive. So NIS2 is for cybersecurity, and the regulations you have to adapt on a national base, and the SARE directive is more for the physical security of the infrastructure. And we are building at the moment a kind of umbrella law for the protection of the critical infrastructures. But again, that's mainly in the Ministry of the Internal Affairs, and they are responsible that with respective elements to make that happen. So from an external point of view, I think there's a lot of improvement, having a look at the past couple of years, but it's quite slow, like it is often in these kinds. And we have different elements, like for example the so-called National Cyber Response Center in Germany, where everybody is in, so from the civilian, from the police, also the cyber command has the representative there, where all the information is coming together. So in the time of crisis or when it's needed, you can work on the information and do decisions there. So in principle, a lot of elements, but the cybersecurity architecture of Germany itself is very complicated. So you can have a look at the so-called Stiftung Neue Verantwortung. They have a great overview, a picture of the cybersecurity architecture, and you have more than 300 elements on there. It's going down to the national level from the different states. So, for example, Bavaria has 16 elements which are important, up to United Nations and these things. So it's not only Germany, but you see the complexity of everything and why some changes and developments are so painfully slow in the political area.
I really appreciate that insight, in particular how your authorities or your ability to work with a civilian organization changes during peacetime, from peacetime to conflict. Within the U.S., in particular the Army, we've got our active and our reserve component, and there's the National Guard as part of the reserve component. They belong to the states, but can be federalized. And in their role with the states, they have some greater authorities to interact with civilian organizations and state agencies there. As we heard from the German perspective, from the Italian perspective, do you have some form of structure that lets you work more with civilian organizations or partner, whether in training or in operations?
So, of course, speaking about Italy, we're speaking a completely different scale, of course, compared to the United States. So we don't have a permanent let's say, structure. So, of course, we have a reserve, but it's not working like it's working here. So it's basically, it's more kind of an ad hoc task force that every time we need is being built up for a specific task. Because, of course, speaking about cyber defense, you always do cyber defense. So there are already, as you were saying, a very detailed and specific hierarchy about how the different computer emergency response team or authorities will deal with the usual cyber defense. Speaking about defense cyber operation, which maybe are more timely specific, in that situation, there will be always an authority coordinating, which has authority responsibility for what is going on. So, of course, we have the National Security Authority, we have the government, then we have some security committee, which different interministerial figures. And then below this, we will have the National Cybersecurity Agency and the law enforcement, the defense, and the intelligence security service, which are the four pillars. Every one of them will share a different part. So the cyber agency will have the unclassified networks. The law enforcement will do contrast to the crime organization, the defense we know, and the intelligence security services will do everything about classified networks. So depending what's going on, there will be one of these four pillars taken care of, and they will have the authority to coordinate which, like within the government, an ad hoc equipment, an ad hoc, how do you say, authority delegation, and ad hoc task force for that specific task.
And maybe I can adding that because it's independent from the cyber service and that stuff. So we have a law in Germany that if some organization deals with a problem and it's not able to deal with the own capabilities, they can ask support from the Bundeswehr in rare cases. That's also possible in the cyber domain. And we can support them, but in a limited way. So it's more obvious in the traditional domain. So if the police has to protect some buildings and the capacity is not enough, they can ask and we can decide on that. But we can only support them by the tools they also have. So we cannot take tanks and support them, but we can, for example, build up some fences and support the defense of a building or something like that. So in the cyber domain, it's the same. We had a couple of years ago a quite huge ransomware attack within Germany, and the responsible organization, the BSI, was not able to deal that completely by themselves. So we supported them on their request with the forensic teams and some additional cyber components. So that's also possible in Germany.
Okay, I've got one more question I'm going to ask the panelists, and then we'll open it up to some from the audience. So if you've been thinking about one and you'd like to ask that, just form a line or move towards the mic, and I will transition to you in just a few minutes here. Okay. So career paths, a challenge that we have, and this goes back to the training, is how do we get enough people? How do we train them? How do we get the right skills? And certainly in the U.S., it's how do we retain them? And sometimes it's they've got great skills, they've been with us for 4 years or so, and they're going to go off in industry and they're going to make more money or have different adventures. Some of what we're starting to do is look at it as I don't need to have a 20-year relationship with every person I bring in. I can work with them for a while now, and maybe later in their career they come back and we do a direct commissioning or we do some other activity to get them to be part of the service again. But recognizing, much like in the corporate world, where people don't stay in the same company their entire career, or maybe they don't stay in the military or the government, but they'll transition back and forth. With the challenge of, I guess, talent drain out into industry, have you seen some unique approaches, and what do you think is working well? Major Trinisi.
Okay, so this is a very, very interesting question. And I was captain commander in the cyber unit, and this was a huge problem because you spend also government money, and then so my colonel, my teacher at the staff course would say, don't fight the scenario. So one possibility is you basically consortiate and do partnership, and so you normalize this, trying to do a win-win situation also for the nation. So basically what you can try is when people leave, make sure they have a facilitation to be driven toward strategical company for the nation, and maybe create a possibility for them to rotate. Because we are speaking always about people, at some point they will become very professional. And so they also, as person, they will have a family with children, and maybe they would like to live in a certain city. So if you kind of like find a way to, instead of fight with between university, companies, and defense, maybe you can just create kind of a facilitation to say, I cannot win alone this fight. I have to cooperate with them. So we should find a way to exchange our talent, also because we can all benefit from this kind of exchange. And so don't fight it, maybe just support them. And this is what we did also in the defense in Italy. We already kind of created a path that they can follow back and forth. And we all benefit from this. Of course, it's still a problem because sometimes they don't stay in this. They just go because we cannot force them. And of course, the law can help us to restrict a certain period of time, at least for the defense forces to keep them. But despite that, it is still a big change. And this has come to a cultural change because sometimes it's a problem of vision. So the vision is there is a demographic and a generational shift. And of course, if they apply for the army, we can always say, you ask for it, this is how we do things, this is what we're looking for, and you have to strictly follow this rule. But we also have to understand that the cyber domain is different from the physical domain. So we were speaking about training. I can say to an infantryman in the weekend, if you want to train, you carve a piece of wood, you create a fake gun, and you run. And you're simulating running with a real rifle. So you can do your training also in the weekend. We are speaking of people that where was already 6, was already training, was already using code, was already doing so. They can do everything they do in the army outside because now we still lack of legal framework that we really allow them to do very different stuff. So very few people are doing very interesting, let's say, operation, while a lot of them are still waiting for something more, let's say, cool, because we are still not there. So we can say to them, join the cyber unit, you can be an hacker legally, but it's still not always happening, and also the equipment sometimes is lacking. So they do training, and they get frustrated. And so it's appealing at that point, looking outside, because maybe behind the corner there is always something good, and this is also a new generational thing. Maybe the new iPhone is surely better than the old iPhone, and so they are always looking for something different. And so I will also cite is an interesting book about the rising of the creative class. So the new generation, the 18, 20, they are looking for a project. They are looking for something interesting. They are not just looking for a good job that will ensure them a good life, or let's say they are looking for satisfaction for project, and if they don't find him, they will not think twice. So the problem we had was that they had to convince their family to leave the army, because their family was still like, why you're doing this? We don't understand. You have a good job. You can rise your career, because we don't understand the new generation. And also, it's changing very rapidly. Like 5-year difference can be a different generation, because everything is changing too rapidly.
I think you already mentioned the most important points, maybe only adding the one or other thing. We had quite, let's say, nice campaigns to attract young people for a couple of years with, hey, come to the cyber domain, you can make funny things and these things. So from my point of view, very good advertisement. But in the end, if we have a look at the moment at the numbers, how many soldiers are leaving the forces, so that I think 5 times than in earlier times. And I think that's a little bit of real world with a new situation back in Europe with the Ukraine situation. And I think the advertisement was nice to attract young people, but not really reflecting what's your job as your soldier. Even if in the cyber domain you can be forced to take a weapon and go to the theater and do the fight. And I think a lot of people only realize that late and are leaving now. So we must be honest with the advertisement and how to attract young people. And I think getting enough talent, especially with the demographic trouble, is a huge problem for everybody. So what we, for example, started already a couple of years ago in Germany is improving the own education system. In the German armed forces, you can do amazing bandwidth of things, also with respect to cyber skills, so up to the university with degrees and everything. So, for example, we set up the research center code at the university and set up, to one point in time, 11 new professorships for cybersecurity. That was a huge project, and we increased the numbers of students for the computer science area very heavily. So to even that number is dropping out, that you have a broader amount of people available. And I think one very important thing was only 2 or 3 years ago, changing some regulations, because in a lot of areas, especially if you're an officer or for other areas too, we had the system that after a couple of years, human resources said, okay, you need a second set of skills, otherwise we cannot put you further on your career path. So you're a cyber guy, but yeah, you're going to logistics now. And that was a killer for a lot of guys I talked to that left the service. And nowadays, based on the new regulation for these skill sets for the cyber domain, we are able to put one without moving to areas, other areas, even up to the level of kernel. So we will see how that will be lived in real world. We still have the discussions, of course, hey, you have to go now there and there, but at least we have the basic paperwork for that and the option to keep the people. And a lot of people who are doing, especially the interesting things in the cyber domain, so also forensics and penetration testing and these things, they love their job. So normally it's not the job why they are leaving. It's also not the money. For most people I talk to, it was never the money why they quit. Of course, it's nice to have more money, but it was because they had no vision how to proceed, or no good chances to proceed further in the forces. So I think that was an important document, but the document is only paper, and I will see how that will be changed, the things in real world in the upcoming years, but at least it's done.
All right, thank you. All right. Now pause for a second. Do we have any follow-on questions from the audience? That means you guys are providing excellent answers. You've covered everything. Oh, yeah, please come up to the mic.
Let's downgrade.
Mike Murphy with SimSpace. We do cyber ranges, so I was particularly interested in some of the comments that you made regarding cyber ranges at the beginning, and I was curious, you said there were some limitations with capabilities, and so interested to understand, what are the capabilities that you feel them lacking, and also know in Europe that they have a strategy to network cyber ranges from multiple countries, and I wondered is that having success or not?
So the cyber ranges at the moment we have, I think they are fine for 90% of the normal needs. So when thinking about cyber operations and the really good stuff, that's not reflected in these things, and you can add a little bit, but it wouldn't be something where I said, okay, industry, provide me a new solution. For example, if you have a look to the NATO CCD COE in Tallinn, they have a cyber range for OT. A lot of these things is handled over the years. It's very good. It's what's needed. And that's also one cyber range we regularly use in connected exercises with a lot of countries. So the experience with doing that is very good.
Yeah, so when we speak about persistent training, we have also spoke about urban environment. So for me, urban environment means that I need my personnel to be able to understand how signals operate in an urban environment. And, like frequency management, legally speaking, it can be tricky. And maybe you can train with certain high-level power jamming signal once a year, maybe not even in Italy. So in this case, having a range that will allow you to test high energy, high level potential signals, simulating and then even a synthetic environment, that can allow me to find a moment, an intermediate midway between the real training in the real world, when I can test my capability and then also see in an environment like that, a virtual one, how is individually doing and how is my team working and how overall the cyber and electronic warfare together, like the CIMA, is doing. So this is the first step. Then is how I do in my laboratory and how do I can be complementary to what you're doing. So maybe you can focus on cyber activity in your simulated training environment. I can do electronic warfare, and then we can go in another place. So it's complementary, but it's also like supplementary. And this is what it's today, I think, looking for.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that some of the universities or different training areas, they're focused in on different things. And you mentioned the opportunities to pursue your education. I'm assuming you completed your doctorate while you were as part of the service. If you are partnering with the university, how does that work? Does somebody get a break from their military duties to go pursue an advanced degree? Is that something they're doing in addition to their military duties? How are some of the approaches?
So with a PhD, that was a chance to go back as a position 3 years back to the university. That was very nice. It's rare, you must be honest. It's not easy to get such a position. The rest also, I'm assistant professor, so I have to do a couple of lectures per year. That's all spare time. So weekends, block seminars at weekends, that's not really supported by the forces. I'm trying to improve that. I'm not too happy about the situation. Much room for improvement with respect to that.
So I would say the first part is about how what we can take from the university, which they do good. So they are more open to young people. So usually, maybe I can change the syllabus and the curriculum in my school. Maybe I don't need to do a fixed training. Maybe I can do more kind of area training, and I can focus on broad aspect. And maybe I can divide everything in modules. And if you already know a module, you just step to the other one. I just test you. And maybe I always test you every 2-3 years to be sure that you still keep your capability, because it's like for the airborne unit, you have to jump from the airplane every 5 years, 3 years. So it's the same for us. And so saying that there is another problem from the university that we have seen. We are speaking about sparkling minds, very brilliant persons. Some of them are here, some of my colleagues from the Cyber Italia unit. The problem is like they get bored easily. Some of them, I have the problem sometimes to take count how many degrees are they taking, how many, because they go in their private life and they pay for their study. So they do the army career and they go for more. And so we have to keep track of everything they're doing to be sure we know, let's say, our firepower. And so this is, go back to the point. When we work with the university, we work with young generation, a new kind of culture. We have a little bit to understand and assess what we can do as the best for them. And one thing is like we always need to give them a project, to give them like a vision, an horizon, like this is where we're going, this is what you're doing, and motivated them, because otherwise, especially the very young, 18, 19, 20, and sometimes they are the best creative and lateral think. I remember I was doing a NATO exercise, I think it's called the Locust Shield, and there was one guy that basically was stopping a Navy ship. He basically attacked the mess, like the dining facility. He shut it down, the refrigerator of the Navy ship. And so the boat had to go back to the harbor because they were without food. So it's like this kind of approach that you can get from the college, from the university, from young people, because they don't follow our very standardized, which it's one part of the persistent training. When we train, we have to standardize the procedure because it's right. But then there is a small freedom of maneuver that we have to let them, which is what they are looking for, because it's the creative part that they want to express and be part of the project. So that is a way you can motivate guys that just come from the university or that take the university degree. Some of them just became engineers.
And maybe adding on, very good point, and yeah, not boring the young generation, of course. Of course, we also have very nice master's programs where you can do as long life learning and these things, masters during the further career. So a lot of new programs, and I think the one or other will also have time during the service to do the one or other module, to be fair, to add that one, yeah.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last question.
I'm glad he had one, otherwise I was going to ask something about lawyers, and that's always...
Yeah, we don't want to go there. So I would just like to congratulate you for assembling a great panel. Everybody is a credit to their nation, and it's easy to see why you're in the seats that you are. My question revolves around mission partner environment, and as we look forward through into the future here on this side of the Atlantic, this is where we're putting a lot of effort. And as we look inside Europe, there's many good reasons why that is. So, Commander Koch, I wonder if you could comment on the naval aspect of that and how you plug in with the allies. And then, Major Tornisi, if you want to handle the land connection, how that looks as you assemble a brigade team to go forward into an area. Thanks.
I have to say, I still wear the Navy uniform, but being in the cyber domain for a couple of years, I'm not absolutely sure what the Navy is doing, but I'm very aware what the NATO exercise civics is doing, because we have that idea about the persistent training environment too, and we have the talks with the US side about the mission partner environment and these things, how to do a year-long training side and expand especially also the capabilities of civics to provide the respective grounds. We have a lot of talks with respect to that, but I'm sorry at the moment not able to answer the question from a German Navy perspective. I can talk with my colleagues and give you the answer later, but not at the moment, sorry.
Speaking about the multinational partner environment, we can correlate that to the NATO federated mission network. So one complaint that there is about the FMN is to focus on protocol. And what is good about the multinational partner environment is tending to be more fast, more quick, so more adaptable to the new future operating scenario where we have hyper ballistic missile and new observation like ISTAR capability. So what the Italian defense is doing is they just released the new cyber defense strategy, which is speaking about defense cloud, zero trust, and for now not about agnostic transport. But this is what I think when I think a multinational partner environment. And when we speak about this, we touch this subject a little bit. We speak about data. So we have a data store, and we have to expose a little bit of this, the one we can share with the coalition outside, let's say, the border. And who can access to this? You have to do a group rule, and maybe you can find a group signature to be sure that whoever you allow to access this data, shared data, can be traced, and there is no repudiability about who did that, and also identity control management. So, but the problem at that point will be which is the authority that will define who is managing this data store exposed outside, and how you basically create a hierarchy in this group that is using this data exposed outside the multinational partner environment. We are already doing, the Italian Army specifically during some exercise, training with the multinational partner environment. We already managed to do connection between the FMN. So it's not new. This is like years ago. So we are doing that. But of course, it's not something easy, because then you find yourself with the problem of where is your need to share, what is that you need to know, what is you willingly to share, and how fast can you push this button to authorize me to use this data? Because at the end of the day, we have the technology to do that, but we need the policy to authorize you to use the data. Because there is still, I would say, reticency, because it's a new option. But we know that that's the direction. If you want a data-centric army, it's everything about the data that you can move at the right place and time and speed.
All right. So with that will conclude our panel. I want to thank our panelists here. Give them a round of applause. And certainly, if we were just talking to an empty room, it wouldn't have been worthwhile. But we appreciate everybody attending. If you have any feedback in particular on how we can make the panel better next year, please let me know. We always want to make sure we're contributing back to the community. And with that, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.